Okay, let's unpack this. The National Disability Insurance Scheme, the NDIS. It's this massive undertaking, yeah, all focused on empowering people with disability.
Absolutely. Putting choice and control firmly in their hands about their lives, their supports.
But, it's a huge system. How do we actually make sure that every single interaction, every service meets, well, the highest standards? Quality, safety, ethics.
That is the crucial question. And it's exactly why we have the NDIS Code of Conduct. Think of it like the ground rules.
The foundation.
Yeah, the bedrock of standards that everyone involved has to follow. And it's not just like the frontline workers.
Right.
It applies to the organizations, the providers, and even their key people, like directors.
Okay. And for this deep dive, we're going straight to the source material to really get this code. We've been digging into 2 key guidance documents.
Released April 2024.
From the NDIS Quality and Safeguards Commission, one's aimed right at NDIS providers.
And the other at NDIS workers. And they're good because they don't just list rules. They explain the why.
The intent behind it all.
Exactly. And they use scenarios, examples, showing what it looks like in, real life, day-to-day support.
So our mission today, it's more than just running through the rules, isn't it?
Definitely. We want to explore the sort of spirit of the code, look at those examples from the guidance they're really illuminating.
And figure out what it all means for you listening. Whether you're getting support, maybe you're a family member, a provider, a worker.
Or just curious about how quality and safety actually work in the NDIS.
Okay, so let's start right at the beginning then. What is this code of conduct? Where does it come from?
So formally, it's set out in the NDIS rules.
Yeah.
Made into the NDIS Act.
The legislation.
Yeah. And its core purpose is pretty clear. Promote the health, safety, and well-being of people with disability. It's worth noting, the commissioner updated these rules back in December 2023.
Oh, okay. What changed?
Some significant things. A key one was making it crystal clear that the code applies to key personnel of providers.
So people with real influence. Directors, managers.
Exactly. People with significant control. And another big addition was a specific rule prohibiting unfair pricing for goods bought with NDIS funds.
Right. We'll get to that later, I guess.
Oh.
But it sounds like it's reinforcing that responsibility flows right to the top.
It absolutely does. And the code, it doesn't operate in isolation. It works alongside other quality and safety measures. It covers both, like the skills needed, the capabilities, and also the attitudes. Respecting rights, preventing harm, knowing what to do if something goes wrong.
And it links back to broader principles.
Deeply connected. It's fundamentally linked to international human rights standards. Think the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities.
Okay. And who exactly has to follow this code? Is it just the big players, the registered providers?
No, and this is really important. It applies very broadly. It covers all NDIS providers.
Registered and unregistered.
Both. And some other related programs too. And as we said, they're key personnel. And critically, everyone they bring in to deliver supports, pretty much. Employees, contractors, agents, even volunteers, anyone you generally call a worker in this context, they're all covered.
Okay, so it really is a comprehensive net. Right, the guidance breaks the code down into 8 elements. Let's walk through them. Element 1, acting with respect for individual rights, freedom of expression, self-determination, decision-making.
Yeah, this one really gets to the absolute heart of the NDIS, doesn't it?
Choice and control.
Exactly. It's not just a catchphrase. It's a fundamental human right. People with disability have the right to make decisions about their own lives.
Like who supports them, how that support happens.
Precisely. And making sure their preferences are known and, acted on.
So practically, what does that mean for providers and workers on the ground?
Well, for providers, it means setting up and delivering services that actually live up to those NDIS principles. It means actively supporting people, adults and kids, in age-appropriate ways to make their own choices.
And consulting them.
Consulting them about who they want involved, their policies, their training. It all needs to reflect this. For workers, the guidance is pretty direct. Engage with the person you're supporting directly.
Don't just talk to the family.
Don't bypass them to speak only to family or carers unless that's what the person wants. And communication needs to be accessible, using tools, methods that work for that individual, and respecting their right to say no or question things.
The guidance uses that scenario about Lee, the 17-year-old. That really brings this to life.
It does, yeah. Lee has an intellectual disability and autism. He was getting travel training. But the support workers kept talking over him, directing questions and plans to his parents.
Not to Lee himself.
No. And they even spoke to him in a kind of, condescending way when they were out. Made him feel disrespected, embarrassed.
That sounds incredibly frustrating, undermining his independence.
Totally. Directly undermining his right to self-determination.
So how did that get resolved, according to the guidance?
Well, Lee wasn't happy, obviously. And with some support from a self-advocacy group and his parents, he felt able to speak up.
Good for him.
Yeah. He contacted the manager at the provider, and the manager, thankfully, responded really well. Apologized straight away, acknowledged the workers hadn't listened to Lee or respected his decisions.
Okay, so they dealt with the immediate problem, but did it lead to wider changes?
It did. They set up a meeting so Lee could talk directly to the workers involved. He even prepared what he wanted to say.
Wow.
The workers listened, they apologized, and then, importantly, the manager worked with Lee to create a simple, one-page profile.
About what matters to him.
Yeah, what matters to him, how he likes to be supported. And that was shared with all staff. The workers then started including Lee directly in scheduling decisions.
So it shows how feedback can actually improve practice for everyone.
Exactly. Using feedback, not just for a one-off fix, but to improve how they approach decision-making overall. And there are other examples, too, like supporting Regina, who's 25, and her mom, to look into supported decision-making options, not just jumping to guardianship.
Right.
Or making sure workers know how to communicate accessibly with someone like Kate, who is nonverbal. It's always about putting the person's voice front and center.
That's a really clear illustration. Okay, moving on. Element 2 is about respecting privacy.
Privacy. Absolutely fundamental. It's a human right protected by law. And this element covers two main things: how personal information is handled, and also how supports are delivered in a way that respects dignity.
So what are the main expectations there?
Providers need solid policies, ones that comply with all the privacy laws, Commonwealth, state, territory ones.
Being upfront about data.
Totally transparent. What information they collect, why, who sees it, how it's kept secure. And workers have to follow those policies carefully. Meaning being super careful about what they say, where they say it, no gossiping, managing records properly, and ensuring supports like personal care respect the person's dignity and privacy.
The guidance had that example about a provider newsletter. A bit of a warning sign.
Oh yeah, a classic mistake, but with serious consequences.
Yeah.
Provider sends out an email newsletter. current clients, past clients.
Okay.
But they put all the email addresses in the to field, not the BCC field.
Oh, dear. So everyone could see everyone else's email.
Instantly, exposing everyone's email address to the whole list.
And that's a privacy breach because it basically outs them as being connected to an NDIS provider.
Precisely. It potentially identifies people receiving NDIS support, which is personal information. And clients were understandably upset.
I bet.
Some complained to the provider, but also to the NDIS Commission, even the Privacy Commissioner.
So there were consequences.
Yeah. The provider apologized, fixed their process, but the NDIS Commission still issued a non-compliance notice, and the Privacy Commissioner gave them a warning. Shows how a simple data handling error can blow up.
Definitely.
And the worker guidance shows how easily it can happen in conversation, too. Like a support coordinator casually sharing info about Brooke with another worker. Or that Glenn scenario.
A showering one.
Yeah, where the worker left the bathroom door open during a shower. Maybe for safety reasons, but you still have to balance that with privacy and dignity.
Right. Safety doesn't just trump everything. Okay, element 3. Provide supports and services in a safe and competent manner with care and skill.
This one's fundamental. It's about making sure support actually helps, gives positive outcomes, and crucially prevents harm. Puts a clear duty on providers for the quality of their care.
So the provider needs to make sure their staff actually know what they're doing.
Absolutely. Providers have to assign workers who've got the right skills, the training, the qualifications for the specific support needed.
How do they ensure that?
Through clear policies, proper supervision, making sure workers have the right tools and equipment, having the right insurance, plus they have those work health and safety obligations too. Protecting workers and participants.
And for the workers themselves.
Workers need to be honest about what they can and can't do. Their skills, their limits. They need to have the required training, the qualifications, follow the provider's policies, WHS rules, and stick to any professional standards for their role.
The guidance included that story about the wheelchair lift failing. That really hammered home the provider's role.
The Sabina scenario, yeah. Sabina uses a wheelchair, gets transport support while she's being lifted into the van. The lift malfunctions.
Oh, no.
Her wheelchair tips. She gets minor injuries, but serious enough to be a reportable incident to the commission.
And when the commission looked into it?
They found multiple issues, all stemming from the provider. The lifts weren't actually right for Sabina's type of chair. The worker hadn't had proper training on that specific lift or even general work safety stuff.
This provision.
That was lacking too. The provider often sent out new workers, unsupervised, before they'd even finished their training properly.
Wow. So the incident wasn't just random bad luck. It was a symptom of bigger problems.
Exactly. Systemic failures at the provider level. The commission found they were putting people, participants, and workers at risk. Not enough thought into equipment, training, supervision.
What happened to the provider?
They got a formal direction. Had to upgrade their equipment, put in mandatory safety training for everyone. A big step they had to take to stay registered. Really shows the provider's responsibility for that foundation of safety.
Yeah, clearly.
And there are worker examples, too, like Jordan. A worker didn't know the behavior support plan, said 2 workers were needed for showering someone. Participant had a fall.
Highlights the worker needing to know the plan.
And the provider needing to make sure they do know the plan through training and systems. We also see examples of workers faking qualifications, that's Hamish, or using therapies they're not qualified for, Tommy. Honesty and competence are key.
Okay. Element 4. act with integrity, honesty, and transparency.
This one's all about trust, building it, maintaining it, which is just so vital in the NDIS.
Because people need good information.
Exactly. People with disability need accurate, clear info to be, properly informed consumers, free from pressure, free from exploitation.
What sort of things does this cover?
Providers have to be completely upfront about their services, their costs, their staff's qualifications. They should only recommend supports that actually meet the person's needs. And a big focus is on conflicts of interest.
Conflicts of interest, like financial ones.
Financial, business, personal conflicts. Providers need systems to declare them, manage them, and ideally avoid them if they could compromise decisions or trust. The code also specifically calls out sharp practices.
Sharp practices, what are those?
Things like deliberately over-servicing, using high-pressure sales tactics, offering or taking kickbacks or inducements, or unfair pricing.
And that unfair pricing rule for goods, the new one, fits under this integrity umbrella.
Yes, that specific rule is now element 8. But the whole principle of integrity covers avoiding any dodgy or dishonest behavior that takes advantage of participants. Workers also have to be honest about their background, their skills. They need to support informed consent, declare their own conflicts of interest, and steer clear of inducements or sharp practices.
The Akiko scenario with the OT provider, that seemed like a clear lack of transparency.
It really was. Akiko and her mom were looking for occupational therapy, visited a provider called OT Supports. The provider advertised a whole range of services, including in-house psych services.
Yeah.
And they suggested Akiko might benefit from counseling for anxiety. Akiko and her mom were keen, but when they tried to book it, the provider got cagey, mentioned red tape delays.
What's really going on?
Turned out OT Supports wasn't actually registered to provide psychology or counseling under the NDIS.
Oh.
They were planning to add it, but it hadn't gone through the process. So they were advertising and recommending services they weren't qualified or registered to deliver.
What did the commission do?
Directed them to stop advertising those services immediately until their registration was sorted. A clear breach of integrity and transparency.
And the guidance also talks quite a bit about conflicts of interest, doesn't it?
Yeah, they're pretty common, so managing them transparently is crucial. There's the Alex scenario. A support coordinator recommends an exercise program.
But doesn't mention their employer runs it.
Exactly. Alex tries it, doesn't like it, and feels iffy that the connection wasn't disclosed. Then there's Tim, the support worker, recommending his brother's mowing business.
So the key is disclosure.
Disclosure's key. The code requires the worker or provider to declare that relationship so the participant has all the facts and can choose freely. And on sharp practices, we see Tamina facing high-pressure sales for a wheelchair. Repeated calls pushing one model.
Not good.
Or Klaus, where a worker pressures a participant to spend their NDIS money. That's exploitation. And Jack, advertising an NDIS business for sale and pretending participants are like guaranteed income streams or assets completely misrepresents choice and control.
Right.
Okay, element 5. Probably take steps to raise and act on concerns about quality and safety.
This is about creating a culture where safety issues aren't swept under the rug. It's about vigilance, making sure problems get addressed quickly and properly.
What does that look like for providers and workers?
Well, providers need good systems, accessible systems for handling complaints and incidents. They also have a legal duty to report certain serious incidents reportable incidents to the NDIS Commission.
Right.
And crucially, they need to foster an environment where people feel safe to speak up. Participants, families, their own staff, without fearing negative consequences.
And for workers, if they see something,
they have an immediate duty to act. First priority, ensure the person's safety. Then consult the person if possible and report the issue, either through their provider system or, if that's not working or appropriate, directly to the NDIS Commission.
Can you remind us what counts as a reportable incident? The serious ones providers must report. Yeah, the code lists specific categories. It includes the death of a person with disability, serious injury, abuse or neglect, unlawful sexual or physical contact or assault, sexual misconduct, including grooming, and using a restrictive practice without authorization.
So a worker spots something concerning, they can't just let it slide?
Definitely not. The Jacob scenario in the guidance illustrates this. Jacob complained to his provider about a new worker being abrupt, disrespectful.
Okay.
The provider's first response wasn't great. The behavior continued. Jacob had to escalate it, get help from an advocate, before the provider finally took proper action with the worker. And they reviewed their own complaint system.
And found others had issues too.
Yeah, found other participants felt unheard. It really shows the need for providers to act promptly and effectively. And the Tamara scenario is important too. A worker reported abuse directly to the commission because her provider wasn't acting.
And there are protections for workers who do that.
Yes. The guidance highlights whistleblower protections. Workers who report concerns in good faith to the commission are protected against retaliation from their employer. That's vital for uncovering safety issues.
That protection sounds key. Okay, element 6. Take all reasonable steps to prevent and respond to all forms of violence, exploitation, neglect, and abuse.
VINA.
VINA. These are serious human rights violations. The NDIS is explicitly committed to getting rid of them, and this element puts clear duties on everyone to prevent and respond.
What specific actions are expected?
Providers need strong policies, training, reporting procedures for VINA, and they have to cooperate fully if there are investigations. Workers, obviously, must never commit VINA themselves.
Goes without saying.
They have to follow provider policies, comply with any mandatory reporting laws like for child protection, and report any incidents immediately, always putting the person's safety first.
The Peter scenario about neglect during that heat wave, that's quite a stark example. It really is. Peter, a psychosocial support worker, visits Steve and his father, Ron. Both have intellectual disability, schizophrenia. It's a dangerously hot day.
Right.
Peter notices they're dressed too warmly, seem uncomfortable. They have a fan, aircon, but aren't using them. Ron says he doesn't want them on.
So Peter respects that.
He does. Despite being worried about their safety in the heat, he respects Ron's immediate wish and leaves without reporting his concern to his supervisor or anyone. Later, Steve ends up in hospital. Severe dehydration.
Oh, gosh.
The provider reviewed it and found Peter failed in his duty of care. He should have escalated his safety concerns, even if it meant respectfully overriding Ron's immediate preference in that high-risk situation.
That's a tough ethical call, though.
It really highlights the complexity workers face. Duty of care for safety might require action or reporting, even when it's difficult or seems to go against what someone says right then, especially if capacity or risk is a factor. Shows the need for good judgment, good training, and clear escalation pathways.
Definitely underscores the responsibility. And restrictive practices also fall under this element.
Yes. Restrictive practices things that limit someone's rights or freedom of movement, like locking cupboards to stop access to food or certain restraints.
And the goal is to reduce those.
Reduce and ultimately eliminate them, because they can infringe human rights and often aren't the best long-term solution. They're very strict rules now. They generally need authorization and have to be in a behavior support plan.
The Jane scenario showed that, didn't it?
Yeah, a provider had been locking Jane's cupboards for years. An unauthorized restrictive practice. A worker raised concerns, reported it. The commission got involved.
What can happen?
They found the behavior the locks were meant to manage was actually a medication side effect, not something needing restriction. The practice was stopped. Shows the code empowering people to challenge potentially harmful, long-standing practices.
Element 7. Take all reasonable steps to prevent and respond to sexual misconduct.
A really critical one. Sexual misconduct is just completely unacceptable, especially damaging in a support relationship where trust and often a power imbalance exist.
How does the code tackle this?
Providers need clear policies, guidance for staff on professional boundaries, acceptable behavior, and strong processes for reporting any allegations or incidents. Workers are held to the highest standards.
Meaning strict boundaries.
Strict professional boundaries at all times. Absolutely no engaging in any sexual misconduct. And a clear duty to report anything they witness, are told about, or any inappropriate relationships to their provider, the commission, and potentially the police. And sexual misconduct here isn't just criminal acts. It includes any unwelcome behavior of a sexual nature.
The scenario with Nathan and the psychologist Jacinta, that illustrated the boundary issue well.
It did. Nathan was seeing Jacinta for psychosocial support. Talking about his sexuality might have been relevant, okay. But then Jacinta suggested they meet for a casual lunch, outside sessions.
Crossing a line.
Definitely. A clear breach of professional boundaries and the code, regardless of her intent. The provider investigated, counseled her, increased supervision, and reported it to the commission and her professional body.
And there was another one showing more direct misconduct.
Yes, the Peter and Aisha scenario. A support worker made sexually inappropriate comments during a lunch break. He was dismissed, reported to the commission. The code sets a very clear line.
Okay. And finally, element 8. Prohibition on unfair pricing for goods.
This is the one added specifically in December 2023. It's quite straightforward, but really important for protecting participants' NDIS funds.
What does it say exactly?
Basically, providers and workers cannot charge an NDIS participant more for goods than they charge anyone else for the same or substantially the same goods.
Can't inflate the price just because it's NDIS funded.
Exactly.
Yep.
And they can't claim or advertise that the price is higher for participants either.
What does substantially the same mean here?
It means goods that are pretty much identical. Maybe a minor difference like color doesn't count. But if there are significant changes, customizations, or extra services bundled in that genuinely alter the item or the deal, then it might not be substantially the same.
Are there any reasons for price differences?
Yes, there can be legitimate reasons. Genuine market price changes, different warranty conditions, buying in different volumes. But simply being an NDIS participant is explicitly not a valid reason to charge more.
The Rohit and Nicole scenarios gave examples of what might trigger scrutiny here.
They did. Rohit's family questioned a $170 shower chair from an NDIS provider, thinking it seemed higher than retail. And Nicole's physiotherapist, after finding out she was an NDIS participant, apparently started charging more per session and offered to backdate billing to use up planned funds for missed appointments.
So that's the kind of thing this element targets.
Exactly, the kind of potential price gouging or sharp practice this rule is designed to stop. The commission would investigate situations like those.
Okay, so if someone, a participant, family, anyone thinks a provider or worker has breached any of these 8 elements, what should they do?
Anyone can make a complaint. Participants, families, carers, workers, public members. The general advice is often to try resolving it with the provider first.
Because providers should have internal systems.
Yeah, they're expected to have processes to investigate and fix breaches. But, and this is crucial, you absolutely have the right to go straight to the NDIS Commission. Anytime. Especially if you're not happy with the provider's response or if it's serious.
And the commission can investigate based on complaints or other info they get.
That's right. And they have a whole toolkit of actions they can take, depending on how serious the breach is.
What sort of consequences are we talking about?
It's a range. Could be directing the provider to do more training or change practices, formal warnings, referring issues to other professional bodies.
And for more serious stuff?
For serious or systemic breaches, yeah, they have stronger powers. Civil penalties, fines, suspending or even revoking a provider's registration, or issuing banning orders.
Banning orders.
Yes, stopping individual workers or key personnel from working in the NDIS sector altogether. And the commission might publish details of actions they take online for transparency.
So there are definitely real teeth behind this code, and it's worth remembering workers might have other codes to follow too.
Absolutely. Many NDIS workers are also registered professionals, nurses, psychologists, OTs, physios.
Right.
They usually have their own professional codes of conduct. They have to comply with both, their professional code and the NDIS code. A breach of one could well be seen as a breach of the other. The NDIS Commission coordinates with other regulators, too, where needed.
Okay, so wrapping this all up then, the NDIS Code of Conduct isn't just like a tick box exercise. It's a really comprehensive framework.
Yeah, designed to uphold the fundamental rights and safety of people getting NDIS supports.
It sets a clear standard for behavior for everyone, from the top leadership down to the person providing daily support.
Exactly. And it's backed by this detailed guidance we've been talking about, and importantly, by potential consequences if those standards aren't met. The recent changes, bringing in key personnel explicitly and that unfair pricing rule, just strengthen its reach.
And understanding this code, it seems vital for everyone involved in the NDIS. For participants and families, it tells you what good, safe, ethical support should look like.
Empowers you to speak up if it doesn't meet that standard.
And for providers and workers, it's the benchmark for their practice, their conduct.
And really is about making sure the NDIS sector lives up to that promise. Choice, control, safety, quality. The guidance is the roadmap for making that happen day to day.
So the code, the guidance, they give us the foundation, the principles, but actually building that truly empowering, truly safe sector, that takes ongoing effort, doesn't it?
It really does. Vigilance from everyone. Open communication, participants, families, providers, workers, talking honestly, and a real collective commitment.
To embedding these standards, not just in policy documents, but in, well, every single interaction, every day.
Which kind of leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? How do we collectively make sure these principles aren't just words on a page?
How do we ensure they become the genuinely lived experience for people with disability and everyone who supports them? Something to think about as you reflect on this deep dive into the NDIS code of conduct.